everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Cafecito today. It's Wednesday of Cafecitos, and I'm super excited for our guest today, Dr. Marisol Capellan, because today we're going to talk about promoting women into leadership roles, which is critically important in for so many reasons, right? Representation. I could go on and on and on. What's important, why it's important, but I'm excited to have here Marisol. You're an executive leadership coach, you're a TEDx speaker, and you just released your book, or you're, in the process of releasing your book, Leadership is a Responsibility. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I would just want to say welcome to the space and to sharing your insights and your experience with us.
Thank you so much for having me here. Love having these conversations. And I think it's very important that we learn and leaders learn how to become more inclusive so that more women can achieve positions of power in their organizations.
Absolutely. So let's start. Like, what's your view on leadership? I know that there's a lot of work that you've been doing on this end. So would love to hear from you. Like, what's your view on that, your take on it, and on the responsibility behind it, right?
So I feel like leadership is something, the concept of leadership is outdated. When we look at leadership, especially the beginning of times, we used to say that someone was a leader, wasn't a leader based on personal traits or characteristics. Let's say if you were someone who exhibit extroversion, someone who was very confident, outspoken, all of a sudden we will say, oh, you must be a great leader. With time, things have changed. Now it's not that much about your personal traits. Like you can be someone who's an introvert, but you can also be a great leader. Like that has nothing to do one thing with the other. So what we're trying to do, or at least what I'm trying to do, is to redefine what leadership means, because we need leaders that are in positions of power not because of their self for because it's self-serving or because they like to have power or have that position, but because they're there because they want to do a greater good. They want to make sure that people that are working under them has have the psychological safety to be themselves, that they feel like they belong, they feel like their intersectionalities of identities is something that adds to the organization, not something that they're being discriminated against for or that they feel stereotyped. So I feel like right now, leadership, in order for you to be a responsible leader, you have to understand that leadership is not about you, it's about the people that you serve and how you help those people become their best self, and also how your leadership impacts society as a whole.
And you touch on, I think this last part is critically important, right? Leadership is about serving the people that, do the work and that work within your team or that in a way influence you. And I think in the past, there was this thought of leadership is only about the business. It's about
Mhm.
making the business, getting to the results. And it does require, to your point, like a redefinition, a shift in the mindset of how I'm going to approach that leadership. And I know that in your book, like you write a lot specifically about the experiences of women, right? Which is very important, especially for us here at United Latinas and their experience in the workplace. So what is like your common, like the common theme that comes up in their work that relates into, helping women achieve those positions, those leadership positions in organizations?
So I would say the common theme is that it's very hard for women to get to those leadership roles. And I will say this because the more I wrote my book and I wrote about my own trajectory in academia, and I have several chapters. So I have my own, part one is about my career trajectory. Then I have a chapter on women, another chapter on Black women, Afro Latinas, mothers in the workplace. The more I read about each individual story, the more I understood that our experiences are very different. We cannot just say this helps all women in the workplace because, yes, maybe that specific factor works for a white woman in the workplace, but not maybe for a Black woman who has an accent in the workplace. For example, sometimes we tell women that they need to be more confident. In order for them to achieve leadership positions, they need to portray that confidence, make sure that they work on their personal brand, that people see them as competent. But that will differ depending on the intersectionalities of identities, right? Because I met a lot of Black women that they are very confident, but that didn't help them move up in their career. Sometimes that hinder their career trajectory because they showing that confident. Sometimes what happened was that they face more challenges. People looked at them and asked, like, basically the question will be like, who do you think you are, that you are appearing that confident, you're speaking up and you're letting us know where we're wrong. And then you have the angry Black woman stereotype. And if you're a mother, there is this stereotype that you can either be seen as competent or as too warm. And if you're too motherly, then you may not be equipped to be a leader in an organization, which is total garbage. I'm just going to say it's garbage, because you having compassion and being motherly or having nurturing behaviors does not preclude your leadership skills. That actually is something that is a win-win for an organization, because leadership, or people that are in leadership positions, should be compassionate, should have empathy. So what we're doing is understanding how have we defined leadership, and how have we defined and identified talent that we move up to positions of power, and under which characteristics are we promoting them. And when it comes to women, usually they face many biases. If you're a mother, you have a certain type of characteristics people are looking for. If you're an Afro Latina, the accent comes up a lot. Because I have an accent, people think I'm not smart enough, I don't know what I'm talking about. If you're a Black woman, it's totally different. So everyone has a different experience in the workplace.
So you bring up a couple of really interesting points in terms of, and it starts with our identity and who we are in that intersectionality, which is not just one thing. It's not a one-sided, I am just this, right? There's all these complexities. And at the beginning, we were talking about redefining what leadership means. And to me, I think it has to do with the values that we hold, as individuals, as professionals, and then those values, how they align with the business that we're in or the organization that we're in. So from your perspective, for example, when we talk about supporting women overall in trying to get to those senior positions, I get a lot of questions from and you as a coach probably have experienced this as well. Like, how can I rise and become a leader that has the visibility, that has the credibility, that has the recognition, but I remain authentic so that I don't have to feel like I'm adjusting, my who I am because of these seeming existing criterias of what a leader is supposed to look like, feel like, talk like, walk like, dress like, et cetera, et cetera. Like, how does somebody maintain that authenticity in this redefinition of leadership?
So I love that you're asking this question, because what I've been doing with my work is making sure that women don't need to change, but that leadership changes, that the company culture changes, that the responsibility remains on the people that are in leadership roles. So instead of asking women, sometimes we feel like we need to code switch, right? If I want to be seen, if I have an afro, sometimes I've heard people that say, well, in order for me to be seen as professional, I have to straighten my hair, right? Which I am so happy that a lot of people have been opting for carrying their natural hair and make it seen in their corporate environments and making it a normal thing. And there's a lot of leaders out there that are embracing um, our culture. Um, but the problem is that if you don't have people in leadership positions that are willing and to become inclusive in a way that people under you don't have to change to move up the ladder, then you're almost forced to code switch if you want to move up the ladder in that organization. If you don't want to code switch in that organization, you can go to another organization that may be more inclusive. But the problem is, yes, we do have that as women. Sometimes we're asked to change our appearances. Sometimes it's not our appearances, but exhibit certain traits. Like, oh, make sure that you exhibit that you're assertive. Make sure that you exhibit that you're outspoken. Make sure that you exhibit certain traits, because that's what leadership should look like. And whoever is in a leadership role or is in charge of, I mean, we all take part of the culture of a culture of an organization. We should not have the efficiency of leadership doesn't come from the traits that you exhibit, but how efficient you are in leading people. Like, what if I'm not code switching and I'm not straightening my hair and I'm not being outspoken and I'm not an extrovert type of person, but I'm highly efficient at leading people. People listen to me. People feel psychologically safe when they work with me. My team works well together. The organization has a healthy work culture. That speaks more to my leadership capability than me exhibiting traits that are what we call leadership right now. So in order for you to move up in an organization, sometimes, there is a culture and people are expecting you to behave like that culture, right? You can be a disruptor. like I always say, be a disruptor. You can be a disruptor to the culture and say, well, I don't think that's the right way. Show your competence. Make sure that people see, well, I'm effective regardless of how I'm dressed, regardless if I have an accent, regardless if I have this and this and that, which is not normal in this organization. You look at my team, they're all productive. They all feel safe. They all feel like they belong. My numbers are to the top. So if I'm showing you with results that my leadership is effective, why do you care about all of these things? And why are you asking me to code switch? I don't see where there shouldn't be a parallel. These two things. One thing, are you a highly effective leader? Another thing is like, be seen as a leader. Is it performative or is it real?
Absolutely. And you talk about 2 points in a way that have been, I think they've always been there, but I've seen more and more as becoming more trendy, so to speak. And I think one has to do with this leadership presence, right? How do you build that leadership presence, and what does that leadership presence mean? And you're just highlighting all of these different. It's not again a one size fits all for everybody, because it depends on who you are and your values and what it means to you. And then the other is the inner piece of the imposter syndrome, right?
Mhm.
Me not believing that I have what it takes to be able to be a leader, because my accent, because I've been told that I'm not good enough for a very long time, so I believe it. Because I feel like I speak in meetings and people keep speaking over me all the time, like different situations and things like that. So in that way, what are your suggestions, especially to the audience that's watching us? Like, what are the things from a mindset perspective, or things that they can start to act on to feel that they can start building this leadership presence or
I
shifting the
think,
mindset?
yes, I love mindset. I love the work of mindset. I will tell you that one of the things I believe 100% is that we need to disempower the notion of imposter syndrome. Um, every time I go to a speech, I mean, a workshop, or I listen to anyone talking about imposter syndrome and how women need to be believing themselves and how women need to believe that they have it, I'm like, stop telling women that they need to fix themselves. The reason why we feel that we don't belong in certain spaces is because we have been told that we don't belong in certain spaces. There is no, it's not because you just woke up today that you decided, I don't feel confident doing this. If you don't see yourself represented in a space, if you don't see people like you in leadership positions, of course you're going to feel like you don't belong in that particular space because you cannot relate to anyone in the room. So instead of us telling women to change, I will say we need to change the representation and we need to change the dynamic of the leadership landscape in organizations. So for women that are watching this, I will say just know that this is a normal thing. That if you feel like you don't belong or you feel like uh, something is off about you being there, is because maybe you were the first person there. Not saying that that's correct, right? But not, don't blame yourself for that feeling. If I were to walk into a new industry and I've never been in that industry before, let's say I'm a first gen and none of my family members have ever been in corporate America, and I'm the first one to walk into the corporate America, in corporate America, I'm going to feel like I'm out of place because no one in my family was there before. So what will work best for me? Thinking that I have imposter syndrome and then obsessing over it and thinking that something is wrong with me. How come I don't feel comfortable? Or just accepting that, of course, I don't feel comfortable in this environment. What am I going to focus on right now? How can I get out of this of feeling uncomfortable? And the reason I'm saying that is because sometimes we need to be compassionate with our own selves. Sometimes we say, "Oh, I have imposter syndrome," and I feel bad about having imposter syndrome, but then also I feel bad because I'm judging myself for having imposter syndrome. It's like a never-ending cycle. So acknowledge that imposter syndrome is there, and then acknowledge that it may be because society has told you that you don't belong there, and then say, "Well, that's he's here, it's normal. I'm going to power through it, and I'm gonna get over it." And I'm going to go after my dreams and achieve my goals. And it's not, nothing is wrong with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to be mindful of the time because we could continue talking about this all day long. But I do want to make a small space for you to share with us about your book because I know you have your launch happening in a couple of days. Uh, Please share away.
Yes, so my book, Leadership is a Responsibility: How to Become an Inclusive Leader in the Modern Workplace by Understanding the Lived Experiences of Black Women and Afro Latinas at Work, is a compilation of three things. So the first part is my experience as a Black Hispanic woman in academia. Um, the second part is the experiences of women in the workplace. And I have a chapter on women, Afro Latinas, Black women, mothers. And also the third part of the book is how to become an inclusive leader, a responsible leader. And it talks about the reflections that I have. My background is in leadership. I used to teach leadership and management and organizational behavior. And I talked to so many different women, and they all share their stories. And I believe that being able to share your story is so powerful. This morning, I did a whole DNI engagement about stereotypes. And I led with talking about my story because when you talk about your story, you can put yourself into the other person's shoes and say, "Oh my gosh, if I was in that position, I would feel this way. If I was stereotyped that way, that will feel bad." So I want to make sure that doesn't happen to somebody that I may be coaching or leading. So that their powerful lived experiences are in the book. I am going to do the official launch on Sunday at Books and Books in Coral Gables. And I'm very excited to have my community attending and to be able to share this with everyone else. But yes, it's been a very interesting journey writing that book and being able to share my knowledge on leadership and my research on women in the workplace with with everyone.
That's so exciting. Congratulations. We need more books like this one written by Latinas to just open, to your point, like share those stories so that people realize that they're not alone. Because in a lot of cases, many of us are alone in our own spaces, in our own environments, in our own organizations. And that's where all of these, to what you were saying earlier, all of these beliefs come in where I feel like I'm going crazy. I feel like, I'm the one that's not fitting in. But I'm sure that when they read your book, they're going to realize, no, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. And then, therefore, being able to find the inspiration, the empowerment, the courage to then, you know, stand
Hmm.
head up strong and say, okay, this is what I need. This is
Hmm.
this is who I am. This is the value that I bring, and this is the support that I need to be able to thrive. So important. Thank you, because I
Hmm.
know that this has been a long time, work that you've been putting so much into this, and it's now come to fruition. So
Hmm.
anybody that's near Coral Gable, we invite you to go this Sunday, or to follow Marisol.
Thank you.
Where can they find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Dr. Marisol Capellan, PCC, just like that. Or they can go to my website, marisolcapellan.com. I'm usually mostly on LinkedIn. Um, and yes, anyone who wants to talk about women, leadership, inclusive leadership, um, please feel free to send me a DM. I'll be happy to talk to you and, and start a conversation. I think we need more awareness, like you said. A lot of people go through stereotypes, discrimination at work, retaliation at work, and if it is a very lonely experience.
It is.
And I remember when I went through that experience, I felt like the world was like ending, because I said, am I the only one going through this? But then, while writing my book and talking to other women who went through the same thing, I was like, oh, wow, this is a problem. It's not only me, this is something that keeps happening across industries, across professions. And we need to speak more about it. Latinas, Afro Latinas, talk about your experience, be vocal, call them out. Because we need to change. We cannot be operating in a world that, you know, barely benefits people, certain peoples, and then highly benefits other people. We're all working in this environment, so it should be equal for all of
Yeah.
us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Marisol, for being with us today. I know we're going to continue to be working together for a lot of other things here at United Latina. So we truly appreciate everything that you're doing to help Latinas just rise. To be the best that they can be in their corporate or other spaces. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us to another Cafecito. A reminder, we have Cristina Costa actually continuing on with something similar to this topic, which is helping us in terms of self advocacy. And she's going to bring self advocacy. How do you advocate for yourself from a Latina perspective? So she'll probably, well, not probably, I'm sure that she'll continue to share some additional bits and pieces of really actionable tips and information on how to go about that. That's going to happen on June 8th at 6 p.m. It's in a virtual space. So you can go to unitedlatinas.com to register for that one. And then we are having Jolie Valencia on June 15th, who's going to talk about building multiple streams of income. Very important, because many of us, again, we are first gen. That's not a mindset that we come with. That's not something that we learn from others. So she's going to take us through the checklist to diversify our income, critically important to build our wealth. And then we're going to have our first workshop in Spanish, which we're so excited, with Marisa Gomez, and that's going to happen on June 29th. And that one is on empoderamiento personal. And she's going to take us through some exercises on that spot to be able to shift our mindset to be able to become more in control of our own power. So she's going to give us very powerful tools on the day of. So we're very excited. And that one's going to be fully in Spanish. That one's June 29th. And then we have other things coming up in July. So stay tuned. Thank you so much, Marisol, again, for being with us here today. And thank you, everybody. Hope you have
Thank
a
you.
wonderful rest of your day wherever you are.
Thank you.